Good evening. My name is Tom, and I'm a grateful follower of Jesus Christ, and I'm in recovery from alcoholism and sexual addiction, and today I choose recovery. You guys need to keep an eye on the front row down here. They're having a little too much fun down here. It is great to be together tonight. What a wonderful place to be on Friday night. I know I've been partially restored to sanity because I can say that and mean that completely. There was a time that wouldn't have been said like that. Let's open our time with prayer, please. Father, we come in this house and we're different people, different experiences with different levels of belief or non-belief, and we all are here seeking. So, Father, as we spend this time together, may the words that are spoken, may the hearts and minds of all of us be drawn closer to you so that we may see the power of recovery in our lives and in the lives of those around us. And I ask this in the name of your Son, Jesus Christ. One day early in recovery, I was watching my then 4-year-old daughter, Catherine. She's not 4 anymore. And she had been with me to some of my meetings. I was one of those parents that annoyed people by bringing your little toddler kid to meetings. But she was kind of interested in what her dad was doing in this recovery thing. And one day, just kind of out of the blue, she asked me kind of a 2-part question. She said, "Dad, you're a recovering alcoholic, right?" I said, "Right, that is right." And then she asked, "Dad, recovering people recover things, right?" I thought for just a second before answering that question because I was really wondering where she was going with her little 4-year-old brain. But the question stood, and after a minute I answered it and I said, "Yes, I think that's right." She wasn't going anywhere with it. She said okay and went back to playing. And I know for a fact, because I asked her last night, that she doesn't remember that little conversation hardly at all. She doesn't remember it at all. But I remembered that conversation many, many times in my recovery because it points to a simple and obvious truth that in recovery, we recover a great deal of what was lost into our addictions and our afflictions. I like the definition of recovery that is offered by the Collins English Dictionary, and it helps to launch this lesson pretty well. In that dictionary, recovery is defined as, and it's in your handout, restoration to a former or better condition. And I would invite you to underline that word restoration because it's the root word of that gives us the title for this lesson, restore. And to those of us who've been in recovery for a little while, we can attest to the fact that much of what we lost that we really needed has been restored to us, but even better, we have been restored to a better condition than before. Anybody in recovery say yeah to that? So that's why we chose this lesson title, Restore. So if you're coming into recovery and this is your first time or the first few times here, and you are seriously interested in this thing called recovery, it's probably not because things are going really well. Do you agree with that? It is very likely that you have lost or are losing things or conditions in your life that really matter to you, and you are losing them or they are already gone. Relationships, emotional stability. I'm not sure if some of us never had that, but anyway. But let's face it, most of us didn't come into recovery because we had nothing better to do on a Friday night and everything was just fine. If you are one of those people that actually came in and everything was wonderful and you want to stop by and help us out, I don't want to talk to you after the meeting. Arlene often reminds us, and she says it repeatedly, that let's face it, we are here because we are not all there. And I would like to expound on that and say that if we really were all there, we wouldn't be here at all. And the thing of it is that most of us We're either unable or unwilling to admit that we were powerless over what brought us here in the first place. We finally came to a point that whatever addiction, affliction brought us into recovery, whether it was drugs or alcohol, sex, relationships, food, any other hurt, habit, or hang-up that brought us to the point where we finally had to admit we had no resources to deal with that and no hope of finding any answers on our own power or by our own resources. Anybody ever been there? That's what Arlene was teaching about a couple of weeks ago. She covered that really well in her lesson on powerless. And she closed that lesson, leaving it a little bit hopeless, but there was the implication, a kind of an audacious claim that in spite of the powerless nature of our situation, there is still the possibility of hope available to us. And we're going to look at that hope. More importantly, we're going to look at the source of that hope in the next few lessons. But tonight I want to take us to the doorway we walk through as we open ourselves up to that hope. And that doorway is step 2, and it's on the screen. Please read it with me. Step 2, we came to believe that a power greater than ourselves could restore us to sanity. Praise God, according to His good purpose. I'm not going to try in this lesson to tell you what to believe. I'm not even necessarily going to try to help you decide who to believe in. But I am going to invite you to believe in something. We all believe in something. But I'm also aware that in a room with this number of people in, we have everything in here from folks who are fully devoted disciples of Jesus Christ, and then all the way to those who just don't know what to believe and don't even know if they want to believe. Tonight, I am simply inviting you to believe. And if we look at what Arlene taught in step 1, and that is true in our life, and you have totally run out of any hope to straighten out the mess in your life by your own resources, then you might just be willing to believe that there is hope somewhere else. Is there anybody in that condition tonight? The simple act of coming to believe that there is hope and it is available is very possibly one of the most powerful moments in the beginning of our recovery process. To believe that, yes, maybe this thing works. Maybe it will work for me. And that for me was the essence of step 2. It's the first 3 words of step 2. And it is simply, we came to believe. Now, when I first came into recovery, I had lost all hope. I was hopeless. And all belief that I had ever had, if any aspirations for a life other than that miserable existence I was living had totally been destroyed. And you know what the embarrassing thing or the sad thing about that is? I'm not sure I wanted any. I've said before in my testimony that when God re-entered my life, I had no hope. I didn't want any hope. I didn't have God, and I didn't want any God. And I wasn't sure I wanted help or any of that. But I could not continue living as I was, and I wasn't sure I wanted to do that either. But I couldn't change the way I was living. So in an AA meeting at a detox I was in, something happened. And no, it was a speaker meeting. An old man was speaking, older than I am tonight, by the way. But somehow, and I believe this was a gift of God, I got just a glimmer of a belief. That is where came to believe started for me. I had just that glimmer, just that touch, that maybe, just maybe, it could be different. And that was the moment my recovery began, even with its ups and downs. I realized much later on that tiny flicker of belief had opened the door to me being restored. That was the doorway that allowed me to walk through. And I got to tell you that the very first thing that was restored was hope. From being totally hopeless in an amazing and a way that makes no sense by human means, I began to have hope. And I continued to go to meetings because there was a hope, there was a reason to do it. And I was doing some of the other things that were suggested. I not only started to have hope, but I even started to grow ever more hopeful. For me, opening that door just a crack to believe that maybe, just maybe, I started to grow this thing called hope. And I am convinced it was a gift of God. And it started it all for me. And it taught me this simple fact, and it's the first fill in the blank, it's this next fill in the blank. And it says, coming to believe restores hope. Now, hope is a huge topic. You could talk all night on it. There are entire lessons on it, and we don't have the time to go into that right now. But I did borrow an acrostic from the Celebrate Recovery Celebrate Recovery's, their step guide, the first one, and I stole this acrostic to help us get an idea of hope. And it's a simple acrostic. The H in the acrostic says for higher power. And the fact is that if you come to a place where you are powerless and hopeless, and yet all of a sudden you find yourself experiencing hope, it has to come from outside of you. Is that right? And if there is hope, and there is, then it must come from some power greater than yourself. And that is the absolute beginning point of faith. I heard somebody once say, and I can't prove it biblically, but they said that hope is the seed from which faith is grown. And I think there's a certain amount of merit to that. But it is also the beginning. I've heard, for any seed to grow, it needs certain conditions. And the interesting thing is that in experiencing hope, we can start to experience those conditions that are listed in the rest of this acrostic. The O stands for openness to change. We start to be open to actually changing. Because let's face it, if we insist on holding on to our old way of thinking and doing, then in all likelihood, we're still going to get to hold on to our old way of living. You know the old saying, if you do what you always did, you're going to get what you always got. Is that true? I believe that the gift of hope starts this process for us to be willing to change. But more importantly, and this is the next acrostic, it's for the P, and it is the power to change. The simple act of starting to believe opens the door to a power many of us have never experienced before. We start what was impossible before becomes possible. From hopeless and powerless to hopeful and finding the power to change. That is the promise of step 2. And what was not even a possibility before becomes a new reality that we can live into, because with the power comes to change, then truly we can expect to change. I've got some good news and maybe not so good, some good news. The good news is that by coming to believe, from unbelief into belief, we can expect to change. And the not so good news, or the better news, depending on how you look at it, is we cannot always predict the ways that we're going to change, and we don't get to control it. The truth of the matter is, we were in control, and that's what brought us to where we needed recovery in the first place. It was brought us to the point where we had to understand we were powerless and our lives were unmanageable. So built into this fact is that our lives will change and that we get to follow along for the ride. We get to go along with it. You see, my life today is not only nothing like I experienced when I came into sobriety, it wasn't what I had planned. Not even after I came into recovery, I started making plans. I've heard it said that if you want to hear God laugh, tell him your plans. You know. But the changes that recovery has brought and is still bringing into my life are beyond anything I could have imagined or hoped for. And it all began by just opening that door a little and starting to believe. Starting to believe that what you see in the people around you, the joy, the happiness, the fun, that is possible for you. It is possible for each of us. But it also started a chain reaction that allowed me to be restored to sanity. Now, some of my good friends may argue whether just how sane I am, but the fact is, if I use the common definition that we use about sanity is, you know that definition? Doing the same thing over and over, expecting different results. You see, it's not doing the same things over and over that is the symptom of insanity. It is expecting the results to be different that shows that you may have a problem. It's an irrational belief with all my history to think that if I drink, I won't get drunk. If I drug, I can control how much I do and what happens next. It is not rational to believe that I can fix that person if they would just let me. I can stop overeating anytime I want. I can go to the buffet, or I could just do a little bit of that internet porn. All of these things are, and more, are indications of the type of insanity we are talking about. But what I want to suggest is one possible evidence that we are being restored to sanity comes when we start doing things differently. And so I would offer you this one suggestion. A definition of sanity very well could be, and that's on the screen, sanity, doing things that have proven to work. You were looking for something long and profound, weren't you? Sorry, wrong guy for that. You see, I think I started to realize that sanity was being restored when I not only went a little while and didn't drink, but I didn't want to drink anymore. Just as importantly, I realized I did not have to drink. And the funny thing of it is, as I look back, I realized I was going to a lot of meetings. It seemed a little weird, but it was, and by the way, still is working. The first indicator to me that I was being restored and being restored to sanity when I was able to stop doing what was not bringing good results and start doing what does bring good results. I would suggest that if you start doing a few simple things, and by the way, I think they're on the T-shirt somewhere, that you will be experiencing being restored to sanity. And these are the things that hundreds of thousands of people in recovery do, and they are being restored to sanity. And they are experiencing a new life because of it. So let me go through these very quickly. The first one is don't blank and go to meetings. You fill in the blank. Don't drink, don't drug, don't internet, don't whatever it is that you need to don't do that. But then go to meetings. Stop what isn't working, start what has worked for so many for so long. The next thing, get a sponsor. We talked about that. Don't go this alone. Find somebody who is actively involved in working their program of recovery and let them walk through this process with you. And work the 12 steps of recovery. This is a spiritual 12-step program of recovery. It is the way that we have seen God transform our lives and the lives of hundreds of thousands of others. And this process, with God's power, can change your life as well. But you do have to participate in this. And finally, trust the process. Trust the process. I would love to say something new and original has come up when we made our change to choose recovery, but no, trust the process. You know, trust whatever is put in front of you. Because all you got to do is look around you and you can see that this is working where things before were not. Because, like I said, if everything was working so good, you probably wouldn't be here tonight anyway. I know I wouldn't. And you see, the beauty of this whole thing is it is not experimental. I've said this, as I've said, hundreds of thousands of people have followed this path into lives of purposefulness, hopefulness, and sanity. This works if you work it. I stole a line from it's the closing line of step 2 in the Alcoholics Anonymous book, 12 Steps and 12 Traditions. And at the end of that chapter, it says this: true humility and an open mind can lead us to faith. We begin at our first step. We start to experience humility. It is in the second step, I think, we open our minds to what God or what can happen if we just willing to accept God. I'd like to invite the praise team to come back, if they would, please. And this is step 2. The closing comments are very simple. I already said them. I don't know where you are in your belief. I don't know if you just can't believe that Jesus, a real person, sent by God, who is God, could enter your life, and that's what I believe. But I didn't start there. I started many, many years ago, and it was a journey for me. And I know very possibly that some of you need to come back to this second step and come to believe anew. Refresh your belief. Maybe that one thing that you just haven't been able to deal with, come to believe again that God can and will. And maybe it is almost too hard to believe that someone you've never met but have heard much about would die so that you would have forgiveness for your sins. Yet that is believable too once you've experienced it. I don't know where you are in your belief. I didn't come here to tell you what to believe. I came here tonight to invite you to believe. We open the altar on Friday nights. We open this altar as a place where if you have a question for God, you feel God drawing you, you feel something drawing you, that you could answer that in a tangible, physical way. We open it to invite you come, and maybe it's a question: God, are you really there? Jesus, do you really care? Is there a place for me in this family of yours? Truly, can I be restored? Can I have this priceless gift of hope? See, or God, my next steps, I don't know where to go from here. Help me, renew my faith, help my belief, help me to come and believe again. This time is for you, and we invite you to come. Amen. Thanks, guys.